Florida State in the Big Ten. Could it be? Well, check out our number of videos focusing on the grant of rights, Florida State's ties to the ACC, and the possibility of the Big Ten reaching out and going after Florida State and other ACC schools. This series is about if Florida State moved to the Big Ten, how would the Seminoles fare? Welcome to the Voice of College Football. We break down the game we all love each and every day with you. Best discussion, debate, and analysis based on your participation. Let's get right to it and check out Florida State's results against the Big Ten in recent years, and more importantly, projecting forward the FSU program against the mighty Big Ten. As I've stated many times and continue to state and lay out, scheduling is screwed up in college football. It needs to be taken over by a governing body, a committee, not by the individual programs themselves, because it results in teams from various parts of the country not participating in play against other conferences. Perfect example right here. Florida State does not play anybody from the Big Ten. They just do not schedule any games against the Big Ten. The Big Ten does not schedule Florida State. Therefore, this is what we've got in terms of results in the last 20 plus years since the year 2000 against the Big Ten. It's Florida State against Maryland. Well, it's Florida State against Maryland when the Terps participated in the ACC and played Florida State every season. Other than that, it's 3 postseason matchups against the Big Ten. So let's run them down. Michigan Orange Bowl is the last time Florida State was on the field against a Big Ten team. That was in the 2016 season. Great ball game against a couple top 10 teams, and Florida State prevailed 33-32. Before that, a lot of games against Maryland, and Florida State was up in the Jimbo Fisher era, and Maryland was down, as you see from the records displayed there. The last time it was really a fair fight was 2010, and the Noles defeated the Terps 30-16, a 9-4 Maryland team. I've actually looked at, through the years, in all these games, count them 14 against Maryland, in which Florida State went 12-2. I'm looking at like 6 occasions in which Florida State and Maryland was a fair fight. They were comparable teams. Otherwise, Maryland was the doormat of the ACC in certain years, and Florida State the best or one of the best teams in the conference. Other games outside of the Maryland series, Wisconsin, the Champ Sports Bowl in 2008, and Florida State was way too much for the Badgers that season, 42-13. And then the Orange Bowl matchup in which Penn State was the Big Ten champion, Florida State the ACC champion in a surprise run to the finish there in conference championship game upset. Penn State 11-1, only lost one game that season by 1 point with 1 second left on the clock against Michigan. And they defeated Florida State in the Orange Bowl in overtime, 26-23. The most valid results against Maryland in terms of fair competition, Florida State against Maryland in the early 2000s. Those Maryland teams were tough at 10-2, 11-3, 10-3, but Florida State, to its credit, with some really good football teams that played in the Sugar Bowl in 2002, of course, coming off a national championship game, PCS appearance in the year 2000, defeated Maryland teams 35-10, 37-10, 52-31, and 59-7. The prior game against the Big Ten before the year of 2000 was the 1997 Sugar Bowl, 97 season, 98 game against Ohio State, and the Noles won it in that one 31-14. So again, how valid are these results? Well, not very, but they're interesting to look at. And when Florida State has had decent football teams against comparable Big Ten teams, we see the results. They won 2 and they lost 1. ACC champ against the Big Ten champ in 2005. Marginal bowl team against marginal bowl team, FSU, Wisconsin in 2008. And then 2 top 10 teams that did not win the conference, as Ohio State bested Michigan, and of course Clemson bested Florida State in 2016, our most recent match of comparable teams against the Big Ten, Florida State, and that conference. And so that's what we've got. Overall, we've got 14-3 against Big Ten teams, now Big Ten teams. Florida State won 5 of 7 against ranked teams during that time. If you take all 17 games, Florida State outscored the Big Ten 328 points. Florida State had much better teams, as you see by the overall record of Florida State football in all these games. So we took the record of Florida State in all these games. So if they played twice in one season against these would-be Big Ten teams, then of course we double the record, and we do the same with the Big Ten teams. So we take the records of all the teams that they face, mostly Maryland, 14 out of 17 games. And this is what it is. Florida State was about 35 games better than their Big Ten competition. Since Bobby Bowden built a dynasty in the late 1970s, Florida State football has been one of the top 5 programs in all of college football, something in that range most of the time. We are, of course, looking at the program since the year 2000, and Florida State came into the century as one of the top programs. They had won the national championship in 1999. They played in the BCS game against Oklahoma, losing by 11 points in 2000. They carried a strong resume into the 2000s, but then the program started to decline. Was still a good program, a fringe top 25 team for most of those seasons in the latter Bobby Bowden years. Jimbo Fisher brought it back, of course, culminated by a national championship in 2013. The issues with Jimbo leaving the program in worse shape, and then Willie Taggart was a disaster, and Mike Norvell has taken some time to rebuild Florida State. One good season, we can't necessarily say Florida State's in the clear, and then they've arrived at the elite status again in college football following 10-3 with only one really good top 10 to 15 victory against LSU. So that's been Florida State football in a nutshell over the past 23 football seasons. Let's look at the numbers. There is the record right there for Florida State, one shy of 200 wins since the year 2000, 121-63 in the ACC, which again is a combination of totally dominating the ACC at times, and then other times during the stretch of Clemson dominating Florida State, initially being the second best team in the ACC and then dwindling from there. They had a 5-3 finish despite their near top 10 finish nationally in 2022, 5-3 in the ACC. Added all up, they've won about twice as many games as they've lost since the year 2000. In bowl play, they're 12-8. They've had 5 top 10 finishes, which if you would have said in the year 2000, Conan O'Brien, cue him up. If you would have said in the year 2000 that Florida State would have had 5 top 10 seasons in the first 23 years of the century, people would have said, no way, they're much better than that. But, of course, they faltered. 15 in the top 25, 7 ACC championships. That's second to Clemson's 8. Of course, Clemson has won most of its since the 2015 season. Florida State won theirs before that. Florida State against the Big Ten. How would they fare going forward? Because that's the focus of the video. Well, the trajectory is going up for Florida State football, of course, but that's only based on one season. And they're losing a lot coming into 2024 after they need to make a strong push here in 23 with a senior-laden team. So I'm not going to say that Florida State's arrived. They give great indication by the recruiting, by the transfer portal, and by, of course, 10 wins in 2022. Right now, they're shy of Penn State. This football program, this football team has not proven as much as Penn State certainly has in the last 5 or 6 years under James Franklin, going repeatedly to BCS bowl games, finishing in the top 10 to 15 in the country. Florida State's somewhere in that Minnesota-Iowa range right now, but of course the potential is so much better than that. They play in the state of Florida, arguably the best high school football playing state in all of the land. And so Florida State obviously could parlay that into, okay, we're now in a better conference. We've got more resources, more money, revenue coming in via the Big Ten. Therefore, we can really kill it in recruiting, own the state, and march on ahead and play well in the Big Ten. Florida State could be the premier program in the Big Ten, but it would be more reasonable at their very best that they would be vying and waging war with the likes of USC, Ohio State, and Michigan, Penn State as well, for the top spot or that upper tier of the Big Ten. But if they are the Florida State of the last 5 to 10 years, well, then they are the Florida State that is going to wrestle around at best with Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and then at worst, well, they can play with Illinois and others. But again, the ceiling is higher for Florida State than most of the other schools that I mentioned. Your thoughts below on Florida State to the Big Ten. 2036 is 13 years away in terms of a grant of rights. Can it be broken? That's another conversation that we've addressed elsewhere, right here at the Voice of College Football.